Hey everyone, happy 2016. This is going to be my first content video of 2016, and I was asked in a comment the other day, could I do a review of the GP4 gas mask? And I thought what would be more interesting than just simply doing a review of the GP4 would be to actually look at the GP4 and then take a look at why the GP5 replaced it in Russian mass production as a civilian and sort of military gas mask if you were sort of a reservist soldier. So, this is the GP4 gas mask. This one's green. Most of the pictures I've seen of these have always been green. I don't know if it comes in other colours or if it was uniformly made in green. So GP4, the hose is attached to the mask there, it's stitched on basically. You don't get this mask with a filter intake port there. The 40mm sort of Warsaw packed filter always goes at the end of here. It's the exact same type of filter that the GP5 takes, except it attaches at the end of the hose. To me, this looks most similar to the PDF-D child's mask that the Russians also made. That had a little sort of thing there, but it's kind of a similar type layout where you've got the mask all built into one rather than the bits being attachments, if that makes sense. So, I'm not sure totally when this entered service, but this one's dated 1968, and it was about the early 70s that they started replacing this with the GP5, and the GP4 is quite a well put together mask. You've got your two sort of eyepieces stitched together on there. Obviously when it's on your head it gives you quite a good field of vision because they're decent size eyepieces, and when it's on your face they'll sort of be in about that shape, so you get some peripheral vision as well as straightforward vision. Interesting thing to note is you've got a very bulky exhale port down there. It's the same intake-outtake layout as a GP5, except for the fact, obviously, as said, there's a hose there, and all this sort of exhale stuff is hidden behind housing. Now, as far as I can tell, there's no voice diaphragm in there, it's just quite a bulky exhale valve hidden behind that metal. The GP5s wouldn't have that housing on there. What the GP5 would have was simply sort of, you know, a thing that you would try not to hit. You've got your intake coming in there, with that sort of thick bit of plasticky metal stuff, and then you've got your exhale there. And obviously this mask was mostly intended for civilian use as far as I can tell from what I've read. However, there's definitely photos where you can see soldiers wearing it. And what I assume happened normally with the Soviet Union was you'd produce masks, and then if you had too many of a certain mask you'd issue it in more places than it was intended for, especially if you're running short of another mask. At the time this was in service, I think it's the MM1, but I'm going a bit rusty here, the tanker mask was in service, and that was quite widely produced as well. That's a slightly higher quality mask than this because it also had the support, the hose was removable, and you had support for sort of it was designed more for audio equipment use because you had that sort of exhale, sort of voice diaphragm on the front. The exhale valve being at the bottom but the voice diaphragm being on the front. So the MM1 was a much better mask in terms of actual usage. And it was a thicker rubber, sort of thicker, higher quality rubber, but that was about the same time as this mask, so I'm assuming the MM1 was more produced for the military. This was sort of for lower rank soldiers, reservists and civilians. So what we have now is the introduction of the GP5, so I'll get that down and I'll set them up side by side and we can take a look at the differences. Right, there's your GP4 on the left, and hopefully that will be left on the screen as well, and there's the GP5 on the right. So, what makes a GP5 cheaper to make than a GP4, and why did it replace it? Well, like I just said, primarily a cheapness factor. You've got several things with the GP5 that make it cheaper to produce. The eyepieces, although they look slightly different, are pretty much the same thing, so I doubt there's going to be any real difference with the GP4 and GP5 eyepieces. So let's look at the rubber of the mask. The GP5's got this quite thin latexy stuff, whereas the GP4's a thicker, sort of more vulcanized style rubber. That means the GP5 is obviously cheaper to mass produce in moulds, so that gives an advantage to the GP5. You also notice with the GP5's rubber, it makes a hood, whereas the GP4 has straps on it. Straps obviously require another material. You've got little metal sort of buckles for the straps there. That's a lot of extra cost and time on the masks if you're trying to mass produce them. GP5's easy, it's a latex hood, you pull it on and it goes airtight. That's a really good simple design for mass producing a mask. So The inside actually has a better feature on the GP5. It's got a very primitive sort of demisting system there where the intakes are. So how the intake varies quite a bit is, there's your exhale valve there. The inhale valve from the GP5, if I can fold this backwards, there we go, that should make it a lot easier to see. With a GP5, the inhale valves actually come up through here, behind the sort of thing, so the eyepieces get demisted as you breathe in cold air, and you've got your exhale valve there, sort of linking to the bottom there. So that's one of the advantages with a GP5, is you've got a bit of a demisting system there, and although it will be a sort of cheaper, less reliable mask, it's still sort of done quite well. You've got another basic metal bit at the bottom here, which it attaches to, but you've basically got your intake the same, no hose there. If you were supplied with a hose, you got the hose separately. That brings down production costs because you don't have to make a hose for every mask. You can limit the hoses for more military sort of civil defence use, and normal civilians get the filter directly on their mask. Exhale valve again is more primitive. There's nothing guarding it. It'd be easier to damage it. You've got an outer flap there and the inner flap that was inside the mask. Very cheap exhale sort of layout. Another interesting thing to note of the GP5 is that you've got this basically, this inhale exhale system is all built onto one bit of metal, which obviously can then be, you can mass produce that in a factory, then you can stitch them all onto the masks as needed. So that's most of the things that made the GP5 a cheaper mask to produce in the GP4 and us replace it. You also didn't have to mess about with straps when you put it on. You can put a GP5 on in literally seconds. It's a really quick mask to don. The military at this point was starting to go to the latex masks as well. You had masks like the PMG, the PBF, and sort of they also had variants of this where you had the ear holes out. Some of them I think had GP5 and then another number or letter on them. I think others were called things like the GP6. Some of these had voice diaphragms on the front, but the normal GP5 doesn't. So then we had these sort of Soviet olive green filters that were the main sort of ones. You see, GP5 is on there as the actual RN5 when it's not in Cyrillic. GP5 for the mask. So yeah, the GP5 replaced the GP4 simply because the rubber was cheaper to make. You could do sort of rubber in one unit. You could do this bit in one unit. I mean, you probably could with the GP4 as well, but it's a lot more obvious how it was done with the GP5. The eyepieces are the same and sort of stitched on, so no real cost difference there. But in general, it was just you could make a single mould for the mask and then fit bits together, stitch them together in the factory. Less, work doing that. Less other bits needed, and actually faster to put the mask on as well because of the design. So that's the difference between a GP4 and a GP5. The GP4 is probably a better mask, apart from the defogging system, in terms of if you're wearing it, it's probably a bit stronger and everything. But the GP5 is of course the world's most produced gas mask. It's a very iconic mask, just a sort of white rubber hood. And it became that way just because of how cheap and simple it was to produce. So there you go. The GP5, that's why it replaced the GP4, and that's sort of my review of the GP4 and GP5 and comparisons on why the GP5 replaced it.